now we're going to have a Q&A session, so all the speakers can sit on the nice blue chairs. And okay, I'll just repeat the questions. Just wanted to know how exactly that Holly got this person.
So as I mentioned, I kind of got to the point after my PhD where I thought I don't want to stay in academia. So the plan was actually to take a year off to try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was walking upstairs in the IBM cafeteria when I met my current boss, Erica, and she said to me, "Hey, Anna, what are you doing now?" And I was like, "I'm finishing and I don't want to stay at UCT anymore, but I don't know what I want to do." She actually had a lab manager position. So I said to her, and she said to me, "Would you be interested?" And I thought, "The lab manager? What does that entail?" She's like, "Well, it's equipment servicing, it is looking after the lab, making sure the facility." And I thought, 1 year where I don't have to think so hard, that sounds fantastic. So that was September, and she made me an offer, and in January I started that job thinking, I'm gonna be a lab manager, it's gonna be awesome, I don't have to stress, I don't have to think too hard. But 4 months in, when they realized all the experience I had in immunology and flow cytometry, I think they knew that, they just lured me in. I started taking on more and more of those scientific projects in the immunology, so it wasn't me going out actually looking for a job.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, so I have a question for Tom. I just want to know the transfer of IP from, I guess, Brew to Cape Biofarms. I know there was some discussions yesterday about kind of arson solvents that cross the line, but I just want to know your experience. How was that?
Very good question. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the IP is definitely something that's kind of been a challenge for us and given me a few sleepless nights because it's so complex. So basically, we licensed from Brew a certain patent for creating an HRP fusion antibody fused to HRP at the genetic level. So that's the license we have for that patent. But the actual process has been around for more than 20 years, so luckily we didn't have to worry about patenting the actual technology. But there are little small things like the expression vector that they were using was for research use only. And when you're in academia, you're using all these reagents and you don't have to worry about the licensing of it. But for us, we had to think about every single thing that went into our end protein, and things like the bacteria even. We had to buy a license from this company in Germany to actually buy our own agrobacteria. So yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve. We've partnered with ENS Africa, so we've got Joanne van Homelen there, who really has been amazing in giving us advice and consulting for us. So that's another example of finding someone who does know this, that we are a little bit shaky about it, and kind of really using her to help us. So yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, great.
Thank you. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, just to tell me once again, Cape Biofarms. How is UCT involved? Is it a partnership? Does UCT get a cut?
Yes. Sorry, there was not enough time to say everything. There's so much I want to say. So UCT are a shareholder. So with THRIP, you have to put in matching funds, 25% matching to the THRIP grant. So UCT kindly supplied that 25%, so they do have shares in the company. We also made sure that the IP holders from Brew also are shareholders, because we wanted to kind of be a UCT company, and give back to UCT as well.
Yes.
Hi. This is a question for a particular speaker, but just generally for all speakers. What obstacles, I know you touched on it briefly when you did talk about KPI, but what other obstacles at the local government level and generally you face when you're trying to start a biotech startup in South Africa? And how do you ensure, or what steps are you taking to ensure that it's the populations here that you're gathering information from are benefiting from the work that you're doing?
Maybe I'll start off with Smith.
I mean, look, from our side, we do very little. Well, put it this way: I wasn't around when it was a startup, so I honestly can't answer. But a lot of the interaction that we have has to be on I think, at an academic level. It's a very good point of contact, if you put it that way. So there's a very good relationship between the academic world and the local government. So that is probably a good starting point. I would suggest from my point of view, but I don't know if one of the others have got further insight into that.
So I think it's a very important question. I think in my personal experience, so for example, the government, when I say government, I usually refer in this regard to the Department of Science and Innovation. They've got what they call a bioeconomy strategy, used to be a biotech strategy, right? And you can look it up on the internet. The issue there is that there's often a lack of cohesion in terms of what's happening at the government level, and you can feel it and see it. And I think this is also one of the reasons why, for example, companies like Synexa, but also others as well, we have to look for an overseas market, because local markets are inaccessible, and you often feel it in a way that, so, I didn't say this earlier, but I'm often warning people of being, look, the typical academic in the country is very passionate. You're passionate about what you're doing, in particular when you look at what's happening at the disease level, and you want to do something about TB and HIV. And you may even come up with a product or a service, and you think that this is the perfect solution for us tackling a health problem in the country. But then you find that the Department of Health either doesn't want to buy it or doesn't have the money to buy it. So you've come up with all of these wonderful ideas, and you even maybe raise some funding, and then there's a massive stumbling block there. So the key thing to overcome this and to do this, you have to, and this is a bit unfortunate, I have to say, you have to have a market outside of the country as well. You gotta be able to scale whatever idea or whatever product you have. It's gotta be able to survive in a market like Synexa does at the moment, is outside of the country, and then you can actually effectively give back, in a sense, or sort of have the time to work with government to convince them, whoever the stakeholder is, that you've got the right product. Because there's nothing there's no security, there's no certainty. There's the way tenders work, for example, there's another cheaper product from China or India, and then your history. And that's definitely one of, so it's cohesion in terms of the strategies and how they're being implemented, and accessibility to the local market is one of the biggest challenges for local entrepreneurs in terms of startups and products.
So I guess I'm not from the biotech industry, but we do a lot of our clinical trials here. So we work with the Department of Health a lot. And I think we've got a good relationship with them and with the South African MRC to ensure our participants really benefit the best that they can when we do our clinical trials. For example, many of you would have seen the 702 trial that was announced a few weeks ago. So it was quite disappointing, but one of the things that our participants got out of that, besides the education, is we made pre-exposure prophylaxis available to 5,400 people who could take it up when they wanted. So we try to give back with things like that, and also trying to put in place education programs that are not necessarily associated with HIV itself, but giving community skills to be able to go find a job, because we're pretty aware that the socioeconomic problem also drives HIV. So those are kind of the things that we do from a clinical trial perspective.
Viva, do you want to add anything else?
Thank you. So I think from our perspective, getting the funding to start Cape Biofarms was not a simple step. We first applied to TIA, which is a technology innovation agency, and they actually didn't look at our application. So we had to try quite a few different funding agencies before THRIP accepted and decided to give us some funding. So I think in terms compared to overseas, where there possibly may be better funding opportunities, especially the venture capitalist ecosystem internationally. But I guess as South Africans, we used to just keep trying, and eventually we get there. So yeah, that was a bit of an obstacle, was actually getting the funding, but we did get it eventually. And then in terms of kind of focusing on the South African context, one of the key steps we want to take is basically trying to create reagents that are South African and African specific, particularly in terms of viruses or certain diseases that are prevalent within South Africa and Africa. Trying to make reagents that are more relevant to the South African context is something that we really want to focus on in the future. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you all for your speeches. They were very informative. This is a question to all of you. So I don't know how broadly this is going to affect the rest of the audience, but for example, if you have a master's in a particular area of biology and it's got nothing to do with immunology or any of the medical side, but you're really interested in heading towards those careers, what could make someone more competitively or more competitive in the market? Like what particular avenues could they pursue to try and improve their skill sets if they're not interested in studying further?
So that's probably very relevant to me personally, because that was exactly my situation. When I started at Synexa, I had no immunology or flow cytometry background, and I was put exactly in the flow cytometry lab doing immunology. And the thing is, I was very open to them in the beginning. I said, look, my only exposure to flow has been in a 4-week course where we literally had like an hour lecture a week. It was a theoretical course, just basically what is flow cytometry, and which is, I was very interested in the technology, but at the time when I did the course, it wasn't like I ever thought this would be a future job. So and I think a lot of the time when it comes to it's going to come down to the interview stage for me personally. And when you present yourself, I think what we spoke about yesterday when it comes to soft skills and the ability to learn, that is going to come to the fore. You need to be passionate about, look, I think also be open and honest with them. I know I don't have these skills. However, I have this, and I will be able to provide this for you. Whether it be soft skills, whether it be just a passion for the research. Don't underestimate the power of passion. There were some good talks yesterday about just be careful about passion. Don't allow it to cloud your judgment. However, it can, if it's something you really want to push for, by all means go for it. As long as you are well thought out about that whole process. To answer your question directly, I think it's going to come down to those soft skills. In my experience, that's what it came down to. And explore other options. Sometimes it does take a bit of a back route to get there, so that is also something to keep in mind as well. I think Tamlin's probably got a similar situation. That plants is definitely not something that you would have done, but yet it's something that you know.
Skills are definitely transferable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm the other way around. I'm plants looking interested in getting into more the medical, clinical section.
I think what's nice about our field is, as you said, the skills are very transferable. I think we just skills are very transferable, especially in the sciences. It's not like you're fixed and this is what I'm going to be doing the whole time. Don't limit yourself. That's the best.
So, I think that some key points came up earlier. Tamlin, for example, you mentioned the growth mindset. I think in Julian's case also the ability, or in your case, is how to experiment, to just go with the flow and try, right? I think another one is perhaps, I remember to this day when I sort of moved out of university, because I think when you're great and educated at university, you go deep, and that makes you confident because you know stuff. But then you go out and you find you're sort of, to some extent, it's an identity problem, because you're seen as being shallow and you're almost like a fraud because you don't know in something as deep as you should. But I think that you need to redefine this perhaps. This is how it worked for me as well. So being a translator, for example, and trying to communicate and connecting with others, right? So it's a different role, right? So, but by and large, it's the openness to experiment, to try and learn. I think that's the main thing.
That's a very, very good point. Imposter syndrome is not just the medicine students. It's something that you as soon as you get into the working field, you're like, I'm useless, I don't know anything. And I think that's a very, very good point to bring up. Don't be scared of that. There's a beautiful graph about when you go through your studies and that, and then how much you think you know versus how much you actually know. And it's something just to keep in the back. It's very important.
And wherever you're planning to go and interview or whatever job you want to go after, find out as much as you can about it and try to show them what you could add. Try and be like, this is an example of what I can add.
I think sorry, just to I think statistically, so this is how it works for me. So that, because statistically, unless you meet a super top expert, you will always know more than most people you engage in. So it's actually straightforward.
Yeah, I think what I was going to say is a master's and a PhD, the way I like to think about it is, like I was saying, you know, you can use it across anything. It teaches you how to think. What is the problem? How do I solve it? And how do I get there? So it doesn't matter if it's in plants or in the clinical science. If you can identify those three things, it really is translatable across many fields. Thank you very much.
I think there was a question, yes.
Questions for Kevin and Julian. Both of you in your companies, most of your scientists are their highest level qualification as masters. So I think a big fear with PhDs is that you're overqualified, and that if you do your PhD, you're kind of trapped in academia and you have to carry on to do a postdoc because you're too scared. There might not be any other options.
That was a bit of a fear I had while I was doing my PhD, because I remember researching and reading that. But I don't think it's that true. I think it just kind of means that you've gone further down the road in academia, so maybe it's assumed that is more where you want to go. But I think it's mainly master's students that we've hired, because that's, I think after your master's you kind of know whether you want to carry on down this road or you would like to move to industry. I think it just kind of happened that way. But I don't think it limits you at all. And as we said, it's also what you bring to the interview and who you are. So I don't think you should ever let that tell you that you can't do anything. So.
Yeah, either way. I think, believe it or not, that's an international problem. There's a very big push in academia, this whole pipeline of bachelor's degree, master's, PhD, postdoc, and then what? There's a very big push for this direction. I think here in South Africa, we have, I agree 100% that masters, that's kind of the turning point for a lot of people, whether I'm going to carry on or whether I'm going to stay. I agree. I think we have this stigma in academia that PhD means now studies. It's not necessarily true. At our company, a lot of some of us even pursue the PhD while working, which I wouldn't advise. Unless it's a scientific company and you have that opportunity, it's a lot of work. But it's not something that's going to limit you. I think it's just a reflection point. When you reach the end of your masters or during the last few months of your masters, this is a time to reflect and say, hey, where do I see myself? PhD is a very big commitment, and to give it up is it's a very big step. I think I'm very proud of you for making that step and knowing where you need to be. So it's a lot of self-reflection. You need to know yourself where you want to be, and don't be scared of making a decision and asking people. It's something that you need to stand the steps of as the saying goes, stand on the shoulders of giants to get anywhere. Really ask, don't be scared of asking.
Change at any point in your life.
Yes.
My mother went from being an investigative journalist and business lady her whole life to running a biotech company past 50. So never limit yourself.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
I wanted to ask so like people know the issue that PhDs don't really like guarantee you having a place in academia, and so I'm just trying to ask, what can PhD students do to make sure that they are able to kind of get more exposure outside the whole academic field to increase their chances of having like places or having jobs in industry afterwards? Because as the person before me said, you kind of feel you're overqualified. You talk about how you've troubleshooted or you've done like few different assays, but in an interview they'll need to see far more than that. So what do you think PhD students can do to make sure that they kind of prepare themselves for that during the PhD, other than having to sort that out after?
I think networking is a very, very big thing. And I think your example is spot on, where you met someone and that brought you to where you need to be. I think each and every one of us have got a story where you met someone or you were able to connect in certain ways, and that was the bridge, the stepping stones to getting really to where you were. I don't know if it's the same across all degrees and that, but when it comes to PhD, it's very limiting. A lot of supervisors put pressure. This is your PhD. This is what you're going to be doing. Like you were saying, don't just focus on, if you're doing a PhD in cancer, don't just focus on cancer. Start reading, start connecting. Your VC yesterday had a very good story about how she
read up on a certain topic on linguistics, which was different from what she was interested in, and went and met the person. So I think people are going to play a bigger role than we sometimes give credit for. So don't be scared to connect with people. Would be my answer.
And just to add on to that, you find out conferences, it's not just the academics who come. The bio industry guys, the industry. It's always intimidating when you're PhD students will talk to the people, but I would actually encourage you, those are a great opportunity for having all of them in one house a lot of the time. And just going to chat to them, and you'll be surprised how many of them 2 years down the line remember. I mean, so when you go for that interview, they're like, oh yeah, we met at such and such a conference and we were talking. And that really makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, just want to also maybe to give a positive spin on the whole PhD story, because the way I look at a PhD is like you manage to climb a huge mountain, right? So you demonstrate the ability to see something through, right? That lasts for a long time, right? I think that's a very positive spin. You can climb one mountain, you can climb other mountains. That's how I look at it. I think that then I totally agree. You just have to go out and reach out and connect. And then don't work on the premise that you've got nothing to offer. We all learn from each other. So I think the more you connect, the earlier you do that, the better. And just have touch points and learn from this connection.
Yeah, if I need to add, I kind of also had to rehabilitate myself a little bit after academia in terms of building up my self-worth, because it was very low, obviously, after having to leave my PhD and after all of the struggle and kind of, you are constantly feeling like you're not quite good enough and you're not quite smart enough and all of that. So that I think is something that you can always work on and will help you in any avenue you choose to go down, is to really constantly change the voice in your head and constantly be your own kind of cheerleader. Just keep telling yourself, you got this, I can do this, I'm great. Just the way you talk to yourself is very important. And then also having your LinkedIn profile, kind of get on that, be visible digitally. And then also, Julian, you said that you also sent out your CV to lots of different companies. So make it your job to go get a job. Like go after it.
It does take effort. I think sometimes we have a tendency to sit back and wait for things to happen. I think especially as South Africans, we know better than a lot of, let's say first world countries. It takes action to get anywhere. So you have to actually step out of your comfort zone. Not to talk badly about Austrians, first of all. I didn't mean about that. We thankfully you came to South Africa, the best country in the world. But it just takes a bit of action. I think it's a skill being able to go to someone and say, hi, I'm so and so. It's not an easy first step. The first time you do it is your heart is racing. If you're anything like me, I know I've come across as a people person, but it's really nerve-wracking. I'll be the one that will stand awkwardly by my stand, like waiting for people to come talk to me. When you come talk to me, I'm the friendliest guy. So just be that person that actually goes and says, I'd love to hear more about your company. These stands that are up there, go to conferences, and also just sometimes a simple email. Heard about your company, we'd love to hear more. A lot of the companies actually, we really enjoy it when you want to, even if it's just a guided tour. I've heard more about industry, I'm busy with my master's PhD now. I'd love to know what are the options out there. Contact Cape via HBTN, all of these different places, and actually go and say, guys, what do you do? Would you mind if I come and spend an afternoon and chat to your scientists? That really helped me as well.
Other questions? Yes.
So just in terms of your exposure to the overseas market, a lot of South African companies have really struggled to take a business that works over here and make it work overseas. How do you find it in the biotech industry in a overseas market where you have all these other really, really big companies also trying to do their thing?
Yeah, I think competition is a very big thing. So it's important to get that exposure early. I think Grana had some very good insights right now into actually you need to market yourself as a global company right in the beginning. So Synexa, as I said, we've got international companies now. What did help is obviously our CEO is from Ireland, so that kind of pushed that he was there on the ground, he could connect with people face to face. Unfortunately, travel is expensive, but it's very necessary. You know, you need to actually, if it takes a company to actually connect with people, conferences, trade shows, those are the places where you need to meet people. Emailing, cold calling doesn't work anymore necessarily. You need to market yourself and be there and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what we do, what can I do for you? So it does take a lot of face-to-face interaction and a lot of groundwork to get to that stage. You got to start somewhere, sure, but as we were saying, you know, in South Africa, it is a difficult market. You need to get an international presence as quickly as possible, and then we can bring that back and say, look, we have this international standing, this reputation. And now we are a trusted brand. In South Africa, it's all about trusted brands, right? So we trust people who have an international presence. So once you have that, we can bring it back. But to go back to your initial question, I think face-to-face interaction is very important. That would be from something
Just to add to this, I think this is also not a specifically South African problem. When the company in Austria, we almost failed here because so energy has a 25% prevalence, right? So you think there's a big market, but nobody was looking at the product because it's just like they rather buy a product that comes from the US rather than from Austria. So our biggest market is actually in Italy and Southern Europe. And then we're just doing a project in Dubai, and the second thing there is that when many people there are going Ferraris, you cannot service a Ferrari in Dubai, you have to send it to Italy because I don't know, it just doesn't work. So there's always a sentiment that like, oh, it's here, like, who are you? So you trust so you're always gonna face that, and that is a
Just from our point of view, we are a very young startup. You know, we're less than 2 years old, and our trip grant was just to prove commercial viability. So we kind of got to that point, and now we're only entering the market, and we are kind of toying with, you know, should we first start with the South African market and then move internationally? But now I'm also learning today. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe we should actually. We've got distributors internationally, so maybe we should push that more and then come back here. So it is tricky, but also what we're trying to do is solve a few of the problems that researchers are facing here because we're importing all of our reagents from international companies. There's long lead times. You know, it's very expensive. There's things like the Department of Agriculture fish DAF. They've blocked the import of PSA and a few other antibodies. So these are kind of on-the-ground problems that we're trying to solve, but it is also tricky. This market is a bit tricky as well.
I think we have time for about 3 more questions. Okay, I have a question. So you started off as a research associate,
Yes.
and now you're in the business side. So was there extra training that you learned on the job?
So I think it's very company specific. Well, it's a mix of both. So at Synexus, it's something that I was very happy to see was they're really keen on personal growth and personal development, which is quite unique. So, you know, when I started as a research associate, it was a bit of a quiet time for the company, so there was a lot of time to actually reflect and see, where does this future career take me? So I spent a few months, actually not even a full year, as a research associate. I won't say that I've got bored, but me personally, I need to be challenged constantly. Like, that's just me, my own personality. So I kind of felt, twiddling my thumbs here, I could be of more use elsewhere. So I started interacting more with, or started helping management actually interact with clients and that, and started, one thing I'm very passionate about is connecting with people and getting action. So, there's a lot of need for, some deals that they just fall off the boat, or, the machinery that needed to be serviced and nothing was happening. I was the one that was taking the reins and saying, hey guys, let's lead that conversation and get going. So anyway, long story short, Exco saw that and said, hey, do you want to help with the business development side? The way that we were going about it was very old-fashioned, cold emailing, hey, this is Synexus, this is what we do, doesn't work, right? So I did a bit of homework into marketing, etc. And I said to Exco, look, I've got a few ideas, let me present this to you. And they loved it. They said, do you want to do this full time? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. So, there is definitely a need for definitely some on-the-job training, and I think companies need to be cognizant of that, especially at the scientific level. The face of science, as we know, it is changing massively. I didn't get into it too much in the presentation, but there's things like artificial intelligence. Data science is going to be very important in the next 5 to 10 years. So South Africa is still a bit behind that curve, and I think you guys as the future scientists need to keep cognizant of that. So on-the-job training,
things like that is going to be very, very important. So it's something that I think every company should consider as part of the ongoing training. Absolutely, I think you can never. I had just a very quick point in my presentation about being multi-skilled. That is going to be very, very important. So not just soft skills, but actually physical skills as well. Learning, unfortunately, I don't know about all of us are IT, interested in IT at all, but things like data science and programming, learning a bit of, even if it's just the ability to understand, it doesn't mean you're going to take it. But it's going to become such a big part of all jobs in the future, especially in the sciences, that we need to at least be able to understand. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and in fact, like you're saying, I do a lot of Coursera courses, but I've also just started a master's at the beginning of this year. Because I can do the immunology, but I felt like I was missing that gap to how does that translate upstream when it gets to developers and more biotech guys. So constantly studying, I think, it helps direct you.
Yeah. There's always something you can add to the company. The company is not fixed. This is what we're going to be, and this is who we are. For companies change, and you as the employee are going to be the one who's going to be changing that company. So yeah, absolutely. Do as many courses and anything that you're interested in, do it. Really, I think it's important.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Yes?
So from a UCT side, there was a question about skills that people could add to their CV, which is something they can do in their own time. And we're trying to encourage a lot of the honors students to pick up either programming language or some sort of exposure to command line as something that you can kind of teach yourself at home, and that is very, very useful. Would the panel agree with that as advice, or do you think it's a waste of time? What do you think?
I would say it's probably pretty good advice.
Especially if you're interested in that. So I think it is also personal specific. So you really need to kind of know who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are. Not everyone is for doing marketing. Not everyone is good at being a manager. And some people are just amazing scientists, and that's what you should do. You should be at the bench. So I think it is up to you. If you're feeling interested in that, then do it. But don't do it just because. I think rather pick another course or skill to add that you are interested in. That's just my perspective.
Yeah.
So I think just to add to this, I think the points are very important here. So just thinking, in operations management, in the traditional way it's been done by the Japanese, for example, there's this concept that the same managers on the shop floor, they have to categorically video to understand what's happening on the ground. So the reason I'm saying is I think it's useful for you to do, even during a PhD, whatever you do, go and spend time in an area that you're interested in, even if it's volunteering, because you wanna get a feeling for what it's like, because it's often completely different. I mean, the one thing that I learned, it was like what we did in the company when I first started working in a company was like night and day. Nothing was the same, right? And so the more you've got that experience, and I think just thinking about a CV, what I like on CVs is if somebody, I don't know, you spent time at Pick and Pay, or so you did something completely different, but you immersed yourself in something, and it demonstrates that openness to learning, but also to acquiring other skills as well. I think that's what I would be looking for in a PhD. The other stuff is all good, additional education, but nobody, I think, would normally doubt and question if somebody has a PhD, your ability to learn, that they're going to take for granted. But actually going somewhere and doing something different is actually what I would look for example.
And that's actually what made me decide not to be a doctor. Because I shadowed doctors, and I couldn't do it. I was like, no, this is too much. It's not what I envisioned it to be.
I think that's actually something we should have spoken a bit more, but it's so important. Like every single one of us, we go into the workplace, it's nothing like it. I've never seen so much paperwork in my life as when you start as a research associate. And it's important because you're in a clinical environment, everything needs to be validated, needs to be checked, but no one tells you this when you're doing your studies, then you get there and you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. But it's such an integral part, so go and shadow, go and find out, and ask the hard questions. So what don't you like about your job? What do you like about your job? Find someone who's going to be open and honest with that. That's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went to one of the workshops at the UCT Career Service on Upper Campus, and that was really helpful. And one of the ladies there, she told me that if if you ever get hold of someone who's in the job that you want and say to them, look, can I please have just one cup of coffee with you and just ask you about your job? Very few of them will say no. You know, if you're just asking for information, if you're just wanting to know. So kind of do that, do your research, go out and actually see what it's like. Because you're, like as the other panel people were saying, like the idea of what it is and then actually the on the ground experience is sometimes night and day.
Thank you all for speaking and taking time to speak to us, and you guys for attending. I think I've all learned something valuable from everybody. Quitting is not the end, that's nice. And you can always, yeah, you can always find things better, you can learn on the job. Sometimes it's good to do things that are valuable, and I think also the good thing is that don't burn your bridges, and it doesn't know when academia will be evaluated. So thank you all. Thank you.